Hi guys! I wanted to try something different since we can't see each other and I'm really missing you. I thought we could maybe do at least our read aloud together. So I picked a new book for us to do read aloud, and I will post a video every day with me reading a couple of chapters or 15 minutes, whatever works for our book. I tried to pick something that was kind of funny because I think we could all use a little bit of funny right now. So I'm joining you in my bedroom. That's where I'm joining you from right now, so you're all getting to see what my bed looks like here. And Andrew's currently brushing his teeth. So, are you coming to say hi? Andrew's coming to say hi, because he misses all of you too. Say hi. Well, you have to get in the camera, they can't see you. Yeah, so Andrew's brushing his teeth right now. Are you coming to say hi too, Grace?
Sure.
Grace is wanting to say hi too. See, they miss you.
Hi.
Grace is pretty excited to say hi there because they're really missing going to school a lot.
I miss my friends.
Yeah, okay, she misses her friends. Anyway, so the book that we're going to be reading first is called No Talking. I thought this was the perfect thing to read because right now we aren't talking to each other very much. So, this is by Andrew Clements, who is one of my favorite authors. So, we'll read this every day, like I said. All right, so here we go. First chapter, chapter 1, is called Zipped. Dave Packer was in the middle of his fourth hour of not talking. He was also in the middle of his social studies class on a Monday morning in the middle of November, and Laketon Elementary School was in the middle of a medium-sized town in the middle of New Jersey. There was a reason Dave was in the middle of his fourth hour of not talking, but this isn't the time to tell about that. This is the time to tell what he figured out in the middle of his social studies class. Dave figured out that not talking is extra hard at school. And the reason? Teachers. Because at 11:35, Mrs. Overby clapped her hands and said, "Class, quiet down." Then she looked at her list and said, "Dave and Lindsay, you're next." So Dave nodded at Lindsay and stood up. It was time to present their report about India. But giving this report would ruin his experiment because Dave was trying to keep his mouth shut all day. He wanted to keep his lips zipped right up to the very end of the day, to not say one single word until the last bell rang at 3:10. And the reason Dave had decided to clam up? But it still isn't the time to tell you about that. This is the time to tell you what he did about the report. Dave and Lindsay walked to the front of the room. Dave was supposed to begin the presentation by telling about the history of India. He looked down at his index cards, looked up at Mrs. Overby, looked out at the class, and he opened his mouth. But he didn't talk. He coughed. Dave coughed for about 10 seconds, then wiped his mouth, looked at his index cards again, looked at Mrs. Overby again, looked at the class again, opened his mouth again, and coughed some more. He coughed and coughed and coughed until his face was bright red and he was all bent over. Lindsay stood there, feeling helpless. Dave hadn't told her about his experiment, so all she could do was watch and listen to his horrible coughing. Lindsay's opinion of Dave had never been high, and it sank lower by the second. Now there is a picture here. He is having his coughing fit. Mrs. Overby thought she knew what was happening with Dave. She had seen this before. Kids got so nervous that they made themselves sick rather than talk in front of the class. It surprised her because Dave wasn't all that shy. In fact, none of this year's 5th graders were the least bit shy or nervous about talking. Ever. But the teacher took pity and she said, "You'd better go get some water. You two can give your report later." Lindsay gave Dave a disgusted look and went back to her desk. Dave nodded at Mrs. Overby, coughed a few more times for good measure, and hurried out of the room. And with Dave out in the hall getting a drink, it's the perfect time to tell you why he was in the middle of his 4th hour of not talking, and why he had decided to keep quiet in the first place. Chapter 2. Gandhi. When something happens, there's usually a simple explanation, but that simple explanation is almost never the full story. Here's the simple explanation anyway. Dave had decided to stop talking for a whole day because of something he'd read in a book. See? Very simple, very clear. But it's not the whole story. So here's a little more. Dave and a partner had to prepare a report on India. Not a long one, just some facts. Something about the history, something about the government, something about the land and the industry, something about the Indian people and their culture. 5 minutes or less. Dave's report partner was Lindsay Burgess, and neither one of them was happy about that. There were some boy-girl problems at Laketon Elementary School, but this isn't the time to tell about that. Even though Dave and Lindsay had to give their report together, they both agreed that they did not want to prepare it together. So they divided the topics in half, and each worked alone. Dave was a good student, and he had found 2 books about India, and he had checked them out of the library. He hadn't read both books, not completely, but he wasn't that good of a student. But he had read parts of both books. Dave thought the most interesting section in each book was the part about how India became independent, how the country broke away from England to become a free nation, sort of like the United States did. And Dave thought the most interesting person in the story of India's independence was Mahatma Gandhi. Dave was amazed by Gandhi. This one skinny little man practically pushed the whole British army out of India all by himself. But he didn't use weapons or violence. He fought with words and ideas. It was an incredible story, all of it true. And in one of the books, Dave read this about Gandhi. Here's a picture. He's got Gandhi in the background. This would be a Gandhi. In one of the books, he read this about Gandhi. For many years, one day each week, Gandhi did not speak at all. Gandhi believed this was a way to bring order to his mind. Dave read that bit of information on Thursday afternoon, and he read it again on Sunday night as he prepared for his oral report, and it made him wonder what that would be like, to go a whole day without saying a single word. And Dave began to wonder if not talking would bring order to his mind, too. In fact, Dave wondered what that meant, to bring order to his mind. Could something as simple as not talking change the way your mind worked? Seemed like it must have been a good for Gandhi. But what would it do for a regular kid in New Jersey? Would not talking make him smarter? Would he finally understand fractions? If he had more order in his mind, would he be able to look at a sentence and see which word was an adverb instead of just guessing? And how about sports? Would someone with a more orderly mind be a better baseball player? Powerful questions. So Dave decided to zip his lip and give it a try. Was it hard for him to keep quiet? You bet, especially at first, like when he got to the bus stop, where his friends were arguing about why the Jets had lost to the Patriots. But Dave had learned quickly that by nodding and smiling, by frowning and shrugging, by shaking his head, by giving a thumbs up or a high five, or even by just putting his hands in his coat pockets and turning away, not talking was possible. And by the time he'd ridden the bus to school, Dave had gotten pretty good at fitting in without speaking up. There. That explains what's going on a little better. And it's probably enough, at least for the moment. But there's more. There's always more. And now we're back in class on Monday with Dave, who got through the rest of social studies without saying a word. And when the bell rang at the end of the period, it was time for 5th grade lunch. More than 125 kids began hurrying toward the cafeteria, and by the time they got there, the 5th graders were already talking like crazy. All except one. Chapter 3. Insults. If you had to shut up for 5 minutes, I bet the whole top of your head would explode. As those words flew out of his mouth, Dave had 2 thoughts. First, he thought, darn it, because he remembered he was trying not to talk at all. And his second thought was, Gandhi probably wouldn't have said that, because it wasn't a very nice thing to say. But that's what Dave said, and he said it to Lindsay Burgess, and there was a reason he said it. So, it's time to back up a little and explain. Dave had gotten through the lunch line without a peep. He had pointed at the pizza plate, then pointed at the fruit cup. He had nodded for yes, please, and shook his head for no thanks. He had grabbed some milk from the cooler and flashed his lunch pass at Mrs. Vitale, and had smiled a lot. No talking? No problem. Then he'd sat down at the table with some of his friends, just like always, but instead of jumping into the conversation, Dave had kept a pleasant look on his face, and he'd kept his mouth full of food. No talking? No problem. And because he wasn't talking, Dave had focused all his energy on listening. Listening at the lunch table, really listening, was a brand new experience for him, because most of the time, Dave was a loudmouth. See? There's something more about Dave. And it makes Dave's reaction to Gandhi make more sense. Because if Dave himself was a loudmouth, a real tongue flapper, then someone like Gandhi who could keep completely quiet would seem that much more amazing. Because Dave really did love to talk. He could talk and talk and talk about almost anything. Baseball, cars, dinosaurs, rock hunting, soccer, snowboarding, water skiing, favorite books, best football players, camping, canoeing, PlayStation, Nintendo, Xbox, comic books, TV shows, movies, you name it. Dave had a long, long list of interests, and he had plenty of opinions. Plus, talking always made Dave feel like he was in charge. It was sort of like being a police officer out in the middle of traffic. As long as he did the talking, the traffic went the way he wanted it to. This was especially useful if insults started flying around. When it came to dishing out the put-downs, Dave was a pro. But this lunchtime, all the other loudmouths were getting a chance to spout off. So Dave had chewed his pizza and sipped his milk and listened. And after a minute or two, he began listening to Lindsay Burgess. But only because he couldn't help it. Even though she was sitting behind him at the next table, and even though the cafeteria was almost bursting with noise, Lindsay had a sharp voice, the kind that cuts like a hacksaw. So I said, "Are you serious?" And she said, "What's wrong with you?" And I said, "Because I saw it first." And I did, and it was a great color for me because my hair's brown and her hair's that mousy blonde color. But her mom was right there in the store, so she picked it up and took it over to her, and her mom bought it. Can you believe that? She knew I wanted that sweater more than anything, and she bought it anyway. And then, after school on Friday at soccer practice, she smiled at me, like she wanted to be friends or something. As if. Can you believe that? No, Dave couldn't believe it. He couldn't believe that anyone could flap and yap her mouth so fast and say so many words and be so boring and stupid sounding all at the same time. He took another bite of pizza and tried to stop listening, but Lindsay was just getting warmed up. Because then she comes over after practice and says, "Here, this is for you," and she tries to give me the sweater. So I pull my hands away like she's holding a dead skunk or something, and I say, You think I want that? That thing is so ugly, I would never wear that. And she says, oh, just like that. Just, oh. And she walks away with the sweater. Except now I wish I hadn't said that because it really is the best color and it's really soft. By this point, Dave was wishing he had an iPod because if he had one, and if it hadn't been against school rules, he would have plugged up both his ears and cranked the volume. Anything to get away from the sound of Lindsay's voice. Because once I tried wearing this sweater that was made of wool, and it made my neck itch so much. Like, I couldn't even wear it for 2 minutes. But it was okay, because then my mom found this turtleneck way down in the bottom of my dresser that I'd forgotten I even had. And it was pink. So then I put that on first, and then the sweater was fine. Because, really, it was like the two colors went together perfectly. Almost like a picture in a magazine. Because last week in Teen People, Jenna and Lori and Keith were at this party, like in Hollywood or somewhere, and Jenna had a sweater on that was almost like that wool one I have, and she was wearing these, and at that moment, and that was the moment when Dave completely forgot about keeping silent, and he turned around and almost shouted, "If you had to shut up for 5 minutes, I bet the whole top of your head would explode." And Dave was glad he'd said it, even if it wasn't nice, and even though it ended his experiment, because after he said it, Lindsay stopped talking. But the quiet only lasted about 3 seconds. Lindsay said, "Is your cough all better?" Because I thought I'd just heard a whiny little voice. She and her friends stared at Dave. "Did you say something?" "Yeah, I did," he said. "I said, I bet if you had to shut up for 5 minutes, the top of your head would explode like a volcano from all the hot gas that usually comes out of your mouth. When you talk..." Here's a picture of Lindsay. "When you talk and talk and talk and never stop talking. Yeah, that's what I said to you." Lindsay tilted her head and looked at Dave, sort of the way a bird looks at a bug it's about to eat. "Oh, like there's something wrong with talking? You never have any trouble with yourself blabbing and blabbing every day. We've all heard you." And the girls nodded and made faces. "Well," Dave said, "talking's okay when there's stuff worth saying." Lindsay said, "Oh, so boys can say things like, 'Hey, did you hear this guy got traded to that team and that guy got traded to this team, and hey, he hit real good last year, and ooh yeah, he can really catch.' Boys can talk and talk like that, but girls can't talk about clothes or something? Is that it?" Dave said, "No, but I don't talk the way you talk, like for 1,000,000 minutes in a row without stopping. And Dave was hunting for something strong to say, a real punchline, something that would shut Lindsay up and end this conversation. So he said, "And anyway, boys never talk as much as girls do. Ever." Please take a careful look at that last thing Dave's just said, because with this particular group of 5th graders, that was a dangerous thing to say. And now is a good time to tell a little more about the 5th grade boys and the 5th grade girls at Laketon Elementary School, to explain why it was a bad idea for Dave to say what he just said. Because Dave should have kept his mouth shut. He really should have. I hope that you all are doing well. If you have any questions, you can always email me, or you can get into your Google Doc and start a Google Doc and ask me questions, anything like that. I did post some things in Google Classroom, some writing lessons for us to continue with writing our opinions and our opinion papers. So if you wanted to work on that while we're off for the next few weeks, Or if you go to my website, there are lots of links to lots of different things that you can get on there and do. So, but most importantly, spend time with your family, help around the house, help mom and dad, bake some cookies, make some art, go outside and play. Just stay safe, wash your hands a lot, and use that hand sanitizer. So I hope we get to see each other soon. If not, we'll figure out a way to do it electronically. All right, have a good day.